You're watching Nevada Business Chronicles. Take a journey with us to see the innovative businesses that put Nevada on the business map. Connecting you with the businesses, events, and organizations that bring innovation and prosperity to the Nevada area, please welcome your host, Mitch Burney.
For those of you who don't know, Adam Hopkins is running for Washoe County Sheriff for 2018. Adam has been a guest on our show since the beginning of his candidacy. On this week's episode, we look back on Adam's plans to make a difference for Washoe County law enforcement. For more information on Adam or to make a donation, visit hopkinsforsheriff.com.
What is it that you're going to do? What change are you going to create, and how do you plan on getting there? So let's talk about your platform, your agenda.
One of the most important platforms that I have is the recidivism rate as it relates to inmates in our detention center.
Are you talking about the proverbial, let's take a bite out of crime that we've heard for the last decade and decade and decade?
I absolutely am not talking about that. Taking a bite out of crime is a reactionary action, reacting to the crime that's already occurred. Prior to crimes occurring, there are all kinds of things that factor into why crime is occurring. It is my intent to focus on what has caused the crime and not what we do after the crime has occurred.
I want to see if I understand what you're saying clearly. What I'm hearing is recidivism is caused by repetitive crime. And you're looking at ways to get in front of it before it ever occurs. This is a completely new way of thinking and seeing things.
Most of us have heard the slogan, protect and to serve. We've seen it on the side of patrol cars. We've seen it on the news. We've heard police agencies talking about protecting and serving the communities for decades. The protecting part is relatively easy. What you don't hear a lot about is the serve part of law enforcement. I believe that service is absolutely the most important part. And so let's talk about that for a second. What does service actually mean? Well, in the context of law enforcement and the reduction of crime and the effect on recidivism, service means actually looking at the crime itself, breaking that crime down, and actually figuring out what the root cause of those crimes are. And then taking that information and having an effect on that root cause of the crime. Well, why would we want to do that? The reason we would want to do that is because by addressing the root cause, we can actually stop crime before it occurs in our communities.
You want to get in front of the crime before it ever happens, which is a completely different strategy than I think I've ever heard in law enforcement. How do you do that? How do you get in front of crime? Where do you start?
One way of doing that is through the use of something called the Sequential Intercept model, and that sounds very technical, but really it is not. It's a model that's been used, and it focuses frequently on dealing with people once they've been incarcerated and how you can insert yourself into the life of that person through the jail and through the court system and case management after they leave. It's my goal to take that model and put it out into the community. So when we have individuals that are having a problem with, say, drug addiction or alcohol addiction or mental health issues, that we can identify issues that they're having at the time, sign them up for classes, intercede in some way that provides them with help with whatever that problem is, so that that behavior stops there and doesn't snowball into a life of crime, ending up in our jail.
I want to hear about your Ground Zero initiative.
So I am committed to creating what I'm calling a Ground Zero unit. Within the Crossroads system, they have 5 different stages. This will be stage 0. This is where we will put a Crossroads-like unit within the sheriff's office, within the jail, and we will find those inmates who are drug addicted, are alcohol addicted, or have mental health issues that want to get ahead of that, want to get help with that, and want to follow the rules of our facility. And we're going to house them in that facility. Within that facility, we're going to offer them the same programs that they have if they were to be in the actual in-house Crossroads program. What that does is that allows us to start their recovery and helping them from the minute they get to that jail.
The fact that you're going to take these types of problems on is so inspiring for me right now. After visiting the Crossroads program, they're currently housing 136 men and women. There's 100 people on a waiting list. Now, some people are going to ask a couple of different questions about this. Why should we be offering treatment for people that are addicted to drugs and alcohol? And isn't this a soft way of treating criminals? Where is that line, and how does that occur for you?
What we're doing by creating programs like this, like Crossroads, I don't know if you realize this, but it costs $126 a day to house an inmate in the Washoe County Jail. And if those people have a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction or are mentally ill, you can double or even triple that cost. And you know what else is incredible? And that people just don't realize, they're not thinking about, is that those people that are in Crossroads, they're putting their lives back together. They're going to end up being productive members of society. And while they're doing that, they're not out committing crimes. They're not making victims of our citizens. They're not robbing and stealing and hurting people in order to feed those habits. These are the programs that we need. These are the programs that we need to double down on. And that's something that I absolutely commit to doing throughout my candidacy and throughout my term as sheriff.
Today we're going to have a conversation that will probably surprise a lot of people that we're about to have it. And we're going to talk about LGBTI rights and how they apply to law enforcement and incarceration. So thank you for being open enough to have this conversation. What sparked your desire to talk to us about that today?
There are a couple of reasons why I called and asked if we could have this conversation. One of them is that I have been involved with a local group called the Transgender Allies Group for several years now, attending their meetings because I felt that this population needed to be heard and needed to have a platform. So I felt as an ally to that group, I could actually make a difference. I'm also a Department of Justice auditor, as I've explained previously, where I deal with LGBTI issues in jails and prisons. But more importantly, I look at what's happening in our country today and look at law enforcement and look at our citizens feeling the need to police their police. And if that is the way our society is feeling now, there's absolutely something wrong. And I think that LGBTI issues is just one of those. And we're going to have further conversations about this as we move forward in this process. But today I'd really like to focus on the LGBTI issues and why we need to address that with our community.
What's really interesting is if you try to judge a book by its cover, I would not have guessed that you've been attending these TAG Transgender Ally Group meetings for as long as you have. It's obvious that you're committed to a platform that's on your website called Bridging the Gap. And let's talk about that part of this, because that's just one piece of the gap that you feel exists between community and law enforcement. So let's talk about the issues that affect the transgender LGBTI members of our community and how that applies to law enforcement as well.
You know, it's interesting you should say that I don't look a certain way. If you were to speak to members of the LGBTI community here, they would tell you that it's imperative that we not judge somebody by the way they look, because the way they look is not necessarily who they are. So we have to be very careful with that. But one of my platforms on my website is Bridging the Gap. So this is absolutely a gap, but there are many, many other gaps that we're going to have to bridge. And the LGBTI gap just happens to be in the forefront right now. And so as we move forward and figure out what the best course of action is for law enforcement has to be in that conversation.
This does present challenges, I would maybe call them, for law enforcement in their interactions in the public. And it also, I just found out, really affects how these individuals are incarcerated. So let's talk about how this really applies to law enforcement.
Our citizens should not ever have to worry about their interactions with law enforcement at any level. It doesn't matter what their religion is, what their sexual orientation is, what their skin color is. Every citizen in this valley needs to be treated with respect and dignity. And the sheriff that runs this department needs to understand that intrinsically and be able to communicate that with their employees and with the citizens of Washoe County. And I'm that guy. I can bring about the filling of that gap, and that's my plan. It doesn't just happen though when we are interacting with citizens on the street, because ultimately people are going to be incarcerated. So we need to deal with all of the issues that anybody would face when they're incarcerated. So when it comes to the LGBTI community, it has to do with identification and housing and medical care, essentially all the same things that any inmate of any race or sexual orientation would have to face. So in one way it's very specific, in other ways it's very general. We just need to treat everybody as we would like to be treated and as they deserve to be treated.
What fascinated me was something you recently posted on your Facebook, which was that when it comes to the transgender population, that this really applies to potential in-custody fatalities. So talk to me about that.
There was a recent study in Nevada that showed that 67% of transgenders have thought about suicide. 38% had actually attempted suicide. So when they come into our custody, it's imperative that we train to recognize the issues that they may be facing and keep them safe, as we do with anybody that's in our custody. Remember what I said previously, our two missions in detention are care and custody of inmates.
Speaking of in-custody fatalities, that's one thing that can lead to them if people are not prepared and trained for that. You're also a certified trainer on the subject of excited delirium, and we've recently in Washoe County had a couple of those cases causing death. So talk to me about that.
The dopamine in your brain builds and builds and builds, and because your body is not able to metabolize that, when that happens in your hypothalamus, you have what they call a heat event. So you have hyperthermia. And when I say hyperthermia, I'm not talking about 101, 102 degrees. I'm talking anywhere from 106 to 110 degrees. That will immediately shut down your brain and cause a heart-related event where a person can die within seconds. This is a syndrome that can occur within seconds. So if officers are trained to recognize the signs and symptoms and then trained how to deal with them so that we keep them alive, so we stop treating them as an inmate until we can make sure that they are safe and healthy, treat them as a patient, then we can go back to treating them as an inmate. We have to keep them alive. We need to keep them alive long enough to get them to medical care. And I'm not talking about simple CPR training. I'm talking about advanced medical care.
Before you retired, you were training at the Washoe County Sheriff Office, excited delirium classes. And just after one, something happened. Tell me about that.
Shortly after I began training deputies in the jail on excited delirium, we had a gentleman come in as an inmate that was suffering from excited delirium. I watched the tape of this entire incident, and I could hear one of the officers that I had trained actually say, "I believe this is excited delirium." And what was so exciting was that they immediately shifted from treating this person as an inmate to treating this person as a patient, because they knew if they didn't intercede medically right then and there, that this person could die. This person was transported immediately to the local hospital. He died once on the way and was brought back. While he was at the hospital, he died another time, and they brought him back. We started getting phone calls saying, you better prepare because this person is not going to make it. Ultimately, he lived. Wow. So our deputies, through this training, saved this man's life. So I started being used by my agency to train all the deputies as they were going through the academy. That is exactly what needed to happen. I was so excited to be able to give this information. And then at some point they simply stopped using us and stopped using me to train. And I'm not sure what caused that, but I can tell you the outcome was we had 2 excited delirium deaths recently.
Do I understand correctly, you actually received an award for that life that was saved?
Yes, I did receive an award from the Institute for the Prevention of In-Custody Death. It was the Agitated Chaotic Events Award. However, that award really should not have gone to me. It was given to me because I was the one that presented it and trained it, but it really should have gone to the officer who identified it. He's the one that actually saved that life, along with all the other deputies that were there that night.
In my entire lifetime, I've never seen anything quite like this. You made a commitment when you said and declared that you were going to run for Washoe County Sheriff, that you were not going to wait until you took office to make a difference. So one of the agendas that you had was community action partnerships, CAP teams, and you've had your first meeting. So tell me a little bit about community action partnerships, what you're looking to accomplish, and what this first meeting looked like.
One way I felt that I could accomplish that was to start what I've termed as community action partnerships. Well, what are those? I'm sure the citizens of Washoe County would like to know what those are. Community action partnerships are like a think tank. It's made up of people who have been through the system. They understand what happens when you are addicted to alcohol, when you're addicted to drugs, when you have mental illness. They may be family members of people who have been through those issues. Also, they are professionals in the field, so they understand how to deal with that and help people through them. So we have identified problems. I have identified some of them. The community has identified problems, and we bring these teams together in order to try to make a difference in our community. Whether that is coming up with solid ideas that we can present to the community and different agencies, or actual programs that will make a difference. I said that I would start before I was elected, and I have done that. I had my very first CAP team 2 weeks ago. We dealt with alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and mental illness. We have a team of about 10 people that sat down. We took about 2 hours the very first meeting, and we just talked about what the issues were and the strengths that each person brought to these teams. And armed with that information, I gave them tasks to come back to the table with, and my next meeting is in 2 days. So I am hopeful, and I'm just convinced that this team is going to make an impact. What this does for the community is it starts work now, so that when I'm elected in 2018, there's no spin-up time. We will already have these ideas in place. We will already have relationships built. We will have plans made, and hopefully we will have these programs up and running.
This is just the first of several. You're actually formulating a couple other CAP teams. So tell me about the next ones and who you're calling on to join this next group.
The next CAP team that I have formed is on domestic violence. Here's why. Because domestic violence is rampant in our community as it is throughout the United States. And it frequently has to do with alcohol and drugs and mental illness. But here's something that I've realized in my time here in the community and in law enforcement, is that we have very few locations where we can place people who are victims of domestic violence. We just don't have the housing. And I can't stand by and let that go undealt with without trying to come up with a way to solve that problem and help the community. So I have already started this team, compiling this team. They're all volunteers. I already have people that are volunteering to be on the team, and we will start that community action partnership in November.
Like you, when I found out the depth of the problem in domestic violence in our community, the lack of resources, housing only being one of those issues, you're looking at the totality, really the core of the systemic problem of domestic battery and domestic violence. So talk to me a little bit about the other types of programs that you're looking for this team to create, along with the impact this is going to ultimately have on our community in a positive way that they just can't even wrap their brains around at the moment.
You're right, housing is not the only issue when it comes to domestic violence. I have looked at this problem from a variety of aspects. When domestic violence occurs, we frequently, as law enforcement, take the primary breadwinner out of the house. That person that's left is left to deal with the loss of that primary breadwinner. They're left with having to deal with the children that are part of the household, if there are any. And in many instances, the folks that are left in this situation have no job skills. That's part of the domestic violence that goes on. So we have to look at how we as a community can assist them in dealing with this. Instead of simply going to the house, taking the breadwinner away, the primary source of income, and then just letting them fend for themselves. So part of what I am hopeful that this CAP team will come up with are ways to provide counseling to the people that are left in the household, the wives or the husbands, the children. The children are so often affected by this. They have no say in it, and yet they are the victims. They are the unintended victims of this many, many times. And I want to deal with recidivism as it relates to domestic violence. Law enforcement has for decades gone to the same addresses over and over and over again, and we just tend to deal with these issues, these calls, the same way. We try to arrest our way out of the problem. We are not solving the problem in any way other than for that very brief moment in time. I have looked at this issue from many different angles, and so not only do I want to deal with the people that are left behind in that house, the wives and the children or the husbands, but we also need to look at how we can assist the person who is actually committing these crimes. So people that are arrested out of these incidents, which we have to do by law, my Ground Zero unit will be a perfect conduit for them. That person who may be drug addicted or alcohol addicted or have some mental illness will be able to get help while they're in jail, so that when they come out, they can go straight into wraparound services so that ultimately they get the help they need, because likely those issues are the ones that are causing these problems. So now we've dealt with the problem from the family side, dealing with wife and children and assisting them with housing and job training and whatever we can to give them counseling. And we've dealt with the abuser so that they don't get out and then come back and continue on with that same behavior that continually causes us to be going back to these homes. So what have we done? Not only have we saved a family, we may have saved a life, we have assisted children prior to them being victimized even more, and we've assisted the person who's actually committing these crimes, so that it reduces crime rate, it reduces arrests, it reduces the number of calls for service, it reduces bed days in our jail, our inmate populations, it saves the taxpayer money as well.
People need to understand that in June we have a primary election. They can elect you by a landslide then, and it doesn't even go to a general election in November. We need people to come out June 14th to vote for Adam Hopkins for sheriff. This is important. This matters.
and you need to be elected. Thank you so much for joining us.
You can read about all of these programs on my website, hopkinsforsheriff.com. In a nutshell, there are times in an individual's life that we can insert ourselves that can make a difference. Incarceration is one, and I intend on sharing this model within our community so that our citizens can help identify these opportunities and direct people into the programs that our CAP teams create. These programs combine the incarceration process with a balance of integrity and compassion designed to address an individual's addiction before it leads to repetitive crime, thoroughly guiding the succession of one's recovery. Individuals in treatment have a team of supporters behind them until they are ready to reintegrate back into society. This directly ties into my recidivism reduction agenda. Again, you can read more about these programs on my website. Another of my priorities is preventing in-custody fatalities in the Washoe County Detention Center. This is also outlined on my website. In closing, I want our community to know I will not engage in a negative politically charged race. I personally have always been offended by these actions. With all the conversations over anti-bullying in today's society, I am put off by anyone that would engage in this type of behavior. My actions today are consistent with the actions you can count on as your next Washoe County Sheriff. You are electing one of the highest law enforcement positions in our county. You deserve better. There is better. Me. This administration under my lead will be the most transparent our community has ever witnessed. I ask the press and welcome them to join me in creating these CAP teams and reporting their progress to our community. I ask each member of the press to read the page on my website dedicated to the press. Every aspect of my career has given me a piece of a puzzle. I now have all the pieces. As Washoe County Sheriff, I will have the resources I need to finally put it all together. I will be forging a new path. This is not campaign rhetoric. This is a new way of seeing, a new way of thinking, a new way of acting, and a new way of being. Thank you for electing me as the next Washoe County Sheriff.
For more information on this guest or to see this show in its entirety, visit nvbusinesschronicles.com. While you're there, you can watch all of our past shows on the Chronicles page and stay connected with us by following us on our social media. For information on becoming a guest on our show, contact us at info@nvbusinesschronicles.com. We hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching. Tune in next week at the same time for more from Nevada Business Chronicles.